All right, everybody, welcome back to, is it the second, is it the third, is it the fourth iteration of Martin and Marlow, Marlow and Martin, YouTube, Kilcoyne conversation. Martin wanted me to intro the show here, which caught me off guard because I had nothing planned and I was hoping he was going to have all the topics ready. So now do I have to do homework or what?
No, I got notes, but you're like a big radio guy. I thought, this is a perfect opportunity for you to run the show, take over. But you had so many hot takes earlier, you're probably burnt out on hot takes. Fair? Are we up on this? Is up on the YouTube. So in addition to audio, people can listen to while working out. And it is kind of fun when you hear people say, hey, I listen to those segments, or I'm walking around doing my walk, checking it out. But this is on the video as well. And I'm having my home studio. So this is only like 2 years now, right, that I've had a chance to address this. I always look like shit in the Zoom videos. And then on Sunday nights, we show some of these interviews. So I tried turning the camera around today, but I got to be honest, maybe it's not the camera. Maybe it's me.
No, anyway. To be fair, one of your favorite phrases. So we are 2 years in now to life with COVID and the Zoom world. And I just within the last 2 weeks finally bought a ring light. So I have a little bit of light. I have this microphone down here, but it took me 2 years. I just feel like this isn't going anywhere. And also, it's so easy to get guests via Zoom that, look, this ring light and the microphone combined were about $80 on Amazon. So it's not too expensive either.
In some ways it's great because last week I interviewed Gary Pinkel. Well, he's in Florida. And if we're not Zooming, then it's not like the TV station's going to fly you down to Naples to do a, 30-minute interview. So in that sense, it's great. You can catch up with people that you never would have talked to. I'll tell you one that I'm working on right now. It's very random. But I like old school. I like nostalgia. And I was following Fred Lynn, the old Red Sox and Angels outfielder, on Twitter, and he followed me back. So then I direct messaged him. I said, hey, you want to come on the podcast? I said, we'll talk about your career, baseball and all. He said, sounds good. Send my wife an email. That's a lot of these guys will say, send my wife an email and we'll set it up. But if it weren't for Zoom, how are we connecting with these people from far away? So in that sense, it's great. But what I hate is if somebody is in town, I guess we're an example of this at some point, but it's not the same. Like sitting in a studio, like a radio studio. If you have a radio guest and they agree to come in, the whole vibe is different. They're not on the phone at the drive-through like, hey, yeah, that was one of my favorite moments in my career. Hold on a second. Yeah, skim milk, please. And you can always tell somebody. I've had like 20 Isaac Bruce interviews where he's at a drive-through. So it is better to be in person, but Zoom has also provided access that we wouldn't have otherwise had. Let me start with Gary Pinkel because he was such an interesting figure to me when he got hired. And he referenced this, our interview the other day. He said, oh, yeah, when I got hired, people didn't know who I was. And I come from Mac school. If you go back, and I don't know where it would exist, they passed the microphone around. And I was a young guy, I'm like 31 or something, and they hired Pinkel, and the mic gets to me. And I said, if you could, like a minute or less, explain to people who you are, people who don't know who you are, and give them a little background. If you could, in 1 minute, he goes, and he has the mic and he says, well, that's a terrible question. and I said, do you need more than a minute? And then everybody started laughing. And then he ended up giving a decent answer, but he referenced it the other day. Like, it was my opening press conference. People didn't know who I was or something, but he's the guy who over the years, you figure him out a little bit. He's less intense later. Of course, now he's retired. He's really laid back, but you start to really enjoy people over time. And he is from the cradle, Chuck. You're an Ohio guy. That's been mentioned a few times.
Mm-hmm.
It is crazy how many coaches are from that Ohio area. And, if the Stoops is right, even Bo Pelini. I mean, I'm forgetting all the famous ones who are from there, but Pinkel, part of that whole pipeline. And he told this story about him and Nick Saban. And everybody knows he and Nick Saban were colleagues at Kent State. And he said they were graduate assistants in charge of the freshman study group. Man, so Gary Pinkel and Nick Saban are in the library at Kent State. And he said he and Saban just started talking about what they wanted to do with their life. And Pinkel's like, I kind of think I want to get into coaching. And Nick Saban said, I think I'm going to go home and sell cars for my dad. And Pinkel's like, can you imagine that? Saban's going to quit coaching? I'm like, a moment in history. And he said it's been written about. I'd never heard that before. But a lot of these people, years later, they could just tell stories. They could have fun. And Pinkel's other great answer, and this is really interesting because it's a podcast where now I'm talking about a podcast. But I said, I hate the question, do you have any regrets? Because I feel like it's either cliche or most people. And he said, well, actually, I do. Yeah. And he talked about never winning a championship. He said, I won 5 division titles. I think he included Toledo there. But he said, we were always in the conference championship game. And at Mizzou, they kept losing to Oklahoma. Then they lost to Alabama and Auburn. And he said, I was always knocking on that door. He said, but I just couldn't get through. And he said, it does bother me, which it was a great answer because, you know, when he's coaching, he probably bites your head off for asking a stupid question like that. But I give him credit, Chuck, not only being fun to talk to these days, but being from the cradle. And Pinkel would have been, yeah, you had 7-8 years of his era, right?
Absolutely. And you're mentioning the cradle, which I think the cradle, we'd have to look this up, but I
It's
think
a
that
specific area, isn't it?
well, that northeast Ohio area of the whole Cleveland, Akron, Youngstown area. I know a bunch of those guys, but also, both Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh were both born in Toledo, Rand. And it's because Harbaugh, I believe, his dad was either coaching at Michigan in Ann Arbor, or they're coming through. And Urban Meyer was born in Toledo, but then he grew up in Ashtabula, which is further east near Cleveland. Yeah. So Gary Pinkel, I graduated high school in 2000. He got the Mizzou job in 2000, correct?
Yeah.
So, University of Toledo football, and I grew up in a Bowling Green family actually because my dad went to Bowling Green. My younger brother Nick ended up going to Bowling Green. But the big rivalry, I mean, besides obviously Ohio State, Michigan, but on a more local level, is University of Toledo versus Bowling Green. And so we grew up a BGSU Falcons family based on my dad. We'd always go to basketball games and whatnot. But I went to a lot of Toledo Rockets stuff as well. Toledo was always much better at football. And yeah, I mean, I remember Gary Pinkel and those teams. Washawn Tate was a really good running back. I think, was it Chester Taylor, I believe, played in the NFL for the Ravens. I know he went to Toledo. I had a very good family friend, Andy Boyd, who was a very good football player at Toledo under Gary Pinkel. So I think also that was back then. I think the MAC has more credibility now because of MACtion, because they play all those games on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, which is great for gambling. People love gambling, so people are always gambling on the MAC. And then also, if you go back just the last 20 years, Ben Roethlisberger, who played in my high school conference, and he goes to Miami of Ohio, and so you saw him all the time. You could go back to what? I mean, Marshall used to be in the conference, but you had some pretty good players that went on to have good NFL careers, and also the coaches. I mean, Urban Meyer coached at Bowling Green. You see a lot of these great coaches kind of first starting out in the MAC.
All right. How about a Rams clarification? And this is something I can't articulate properly when you're on Twitter. And we love to make fun of Demoff. We love to make fun of Jerry Jones and all of this relocation sort of PTSD. But I would like to clarify, like, I don't hate the Rams players. Like, I have nothing against Matthew Stafford. I don't even watch a Rams game and say, throw a pick, throw a pick. Now, when the 49ers fans took over the stadium and Stafford's wife called him out for it, that to me is hilarious because that's laughing at the franchise, the Kroenke Demoff. And I don't even hate Rams fans in LA. It was their team. We took them from them. They weren't supporting them. That's why they lost them. And then they came here. I hated the exit. And I said that all along. If they had just announced, hey, we're leaving, we've got this opportunity, our lease allows us to go. But then they wrote the papers how St. Louis is such a crappy place. And it's hard because the Cardinals are so popular and fans just don't love us here. Just sort of ridiculous. So that's the premise that will never let go. Making fun of Demoff and Kroenke, who think they have all the answers. I will always make fun of that. I'm not obsessed with the Rams. Like, if they go 15-1, I really don't even care. If they win the Super Bowl, I guess that's fine. But I would be happy if the team they played beat them like they did a few years ago. But I think people don't get that. And making fun of the crowd today was hilarious because it's a region of 18 million people. 18 million people, and you couldn't find 70,000 to cheer you on. And in classic Kevin Demoff, who was just such a boob in his time here, things like, and what came to mind during that whole 49er takeover to me was the Rams rules, where you had to tell the crowd, shh, we're working now, we're on offense. except the team was god awful and the Rams rules were so stupid. I was thinking they needed this in LA to tell people, hey, quiet, boys at work, except they call it our house, Rams house. They have this whole slogan that I'm sure Dumoff came up with. And he's always tone deaf. He's always wrong. And I thought of you and the Chiron, your greatest hour, and people still talk about it. And I think Dan Caesar even wrote about it when you left Fox 2. Charlie Marlow, who one time put on a graphic, professional liar. People on Twitter still grab that caption, the picture. People have it like saved in their freaking phones. Chuck, that was your finest hour. But I do want to clarify that. Like the players, nothing against the players. Rams fans, I don't care. I think the exit and the narrative they wrote about St. Louis is what still pisses me off. And making fun of Kroenke and Demoff, and then by association, Jerry Jones. To me, that will never get old.
Oh yeah, and the whole professional liar thing. I'm guessing that's because of Facebook, because Facebook does that memories where any post you ever made in your life, they bring it back, not just every 5 years or every 10, but every year. I'll see something I said 12 years ago that wasn't interesting at all. So I think that's because Facebook memories always brings that Chiron back up for folks, and they always show it to me on Twitter whenever the anniversary comes up. Yeah, I'm the same way. We actually talked about this on the radio today. Hot Take Central, 590 The Fan, 7 to 10, Monday through Fridays. But my thing is,
it's just you. You have your own show. It's just you.
It's myself, Cam Jansen, Jimmy the Cat Hayes, 590 The Fan. We're having a good time there.
And is Matt Holliday a regular? Is that what I'm seeing?
So Matt Holliday is our Monday regular. He's usually Monday, I believe, at 9:30.
Okay, that's great. I love.
We
There's
have
another guy post career. You can kind of get to know these people better, and he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have Harrison Bader on Tuesdays, although he kind of forgot today. That
He's
happens.
probably teaching gym. He's busy.
I know, but he had 2 straight weeks. He had a workout issue. It's all good. We actually have Joe Buck, your guy Joe Buck, on tomorrow.
Good.
And we're actually trying to get Pinkel as well. I'd like to get Pinkel on here.
I think he'd be happy. Honestly, be happy to do it. Can I interrupt with a Matt Holliday radio story?
Yes.
Because he has history with 590. So it's 2 parts really. For Frank Cusimano and I are doing a show, and it's the off season, and we're just going around the outfield and we're like doing the Cardinal lineup because
I remember this, by the way.
St. Louis nerds do. And Frank just randomly said, let's see, Holliday's in the left. Well, he'll probably miss some games, so you could put so-and-so in there to fill in a little bit. It was a very simple comment. And then the phone rings in the commercial break. Brian Bartow, the Cardinals PR guy. And the producer's like, hey, it's Brian Bartow. We're like, what? And they said, he said Matt Holliday would like to call in. And so then Matt calls in. We're like, and this is before he did much media at all. It wasn't like now you hear him more often. And we come out of the break and he said, yeah, hey, guys, I was going to the gym and I was listening to you. So we're flattered, right? He's listening. And then he said, I think it was you, Frank, who said I'm going to miss a bunch of games next year, but I don't really miss a lot of games if you want to look it up. And so then Frank types in and he's like 149, 152, 155, 157, 148. He's like, wow, you do play a lot of games, man. Like, and then we ended up having a fun conversation. And he even said something like, yeah, I was just driving along and, I've kind of figured Martin might say something stupid, but it was actually Frank. And he was great about it. And then I think he became, like, by association, a friend of the show. And this caller, Lou, hated Holliday, hated the contract. And a lot of people are mad because he got paid before Pujols and all of that, which actually, in the Cardinals' defense, it was a smart move to lock him up and have a plan. And at that point, they may have known it wasn't going real well with the Pujols camps. We better be prepared. So people didn't always like him, kind of like the Pinkel thing. Eventually, you can win people over. Same with Chris Pronger. Maybe there's a theme to this, Chuck. And Lou was like, yeah, man, he won't even hit 25 homers. He won't even drive an 85. And I said, oh, he'll hit 25. Yeah. Well, he's not going to drive an 85 or 90, whatever it was. And I said, I totally disagree. And I said, let's bet. So Lou liked to go to Captain D's. So we bet a lunch at Captain D's. So at some point, like I told Holliday in the locker room, just talking and laughing, and I kind of forgot about it. And it's like mid to late August and in the clubhouse, and he walks by and he goes, hey, Martin, how's our Captain D's looking? Because he was like right at the cusp in late August of going over both milestones. So anyway, to this day, we still laugh about Captain D's.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. And Kat and I will argue about this because every time he comes on, and obviously he does a hit with 101 ESPN on the fast lane there.
Now, what's
So
that? That's a radio station in town, you're telling
yeah,
me?
I'm able to still talk about that. But on Fridays, when Cam and I used to be at Top Shooters out there in Columbia, Illinois, I'd always drive to Fox 2 right at 3 o'clock. And I'd always hear that segment with Matt Holliday. It was right around 3. And I always liked Matt Holliday, but I think when he was here and he was a player, he was just a little more serious. And so to me, he's now opening up and having so much more fun. And not to say that when he was here, I think it was just more of, hey, he's a professional baseball player. He's a serious guy. He's trying to win baseball games. There is a lot of pressure, whether it's the contract, replacing Pujols, and all that. But now when he comes on the radio with us, we hardly ask him baseball questions. He actually he mocked me a little bit the other day because I love to go on Baseball Reference. I just love looking at stats. And I was looking at his stats, and clearly Matt Holliday has had a great career. But I saw that his career batting average is 299. And I also remember, because he's an Oklahoma guy, that one of his heroes, obviously Mickey Mantle, has a career 298 batting average. And so I was just asking him, does that bother you? Because these guys know all of their stats, and he had fun with it. I don't think this question really bothered him, but he's like, "Yeah, thanks a lot for bringing that up, Charlie." But he did say basically when he came back with the Rockies that final time that he was above 300 for a second. And he said, if I'd have known that we're not going to win the World Series, I'd probably hang it up there so I can have that nice 300. But that would, if I'm a baseball player and I was really good for a long time, however long you played, 14 years, whatever it was, and you play all those years and you're like probably what, 2 or 3 hits shy of 300, that, again, you're not losing sleep over it, but that would tick me off.
No, I think for sure, especially a guy, if you're a great hitter, and same thing's happening with Pools, right? What's he now down is he like 299? And
I
that's
think he's
after,
298 or 9.
yeah. So the same thing. And another anecdote, of course, and at some point, Chuck, I got to get some new stories because they're all going to be repeated ad nauseum. But Ricky Prohl was retired, and he was our Rams Sunday analyst. So we had that 10:30 show, Game Day Live, and you and I did it, Rob Desir, Marie Stroman for years. But one season, the Rams provided him. They paid him to do it or something. So he was our built-in studio host, and we would do the show at Bear Park across from the Rams, and he's great. A lot of stories and all that. So on a particular Sunday, let's say he's done like 8 or 10 of these, and I'm driving to the Dome at like 8 in the morning. Remember how our Sundays for years, you could not get hammered on Saturday night, and if you did, you paid the price because Sundays came early. I'm driving to the Dome at like 8 o'clock. This is in 2006. And he calls me and he's like, "Hey, yo, Martin, did I tell you that I signed with the Colts?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to be there today." I'm like, "You're going to be there today?" Like I'm driving to the show. Probably called like Maurice and said, "Get out of the studio, run down to the Dome," or whatever. But he said Peyton Manning called him. And he's like, "Martin, I love you, but it's freaking Peyton Manning." I'm like, they needed a receiver down the stretch. They were thin at receiver. And one of the reasons, though, in addition to, hey, and he did they won the ring that year because they beat the Bears in 2006. But he said at one point he hated his career reception number because it was 666. And his wife and him, I think they're both, fairly religious, but his wife just hated the 666. So if you look it up that year, I think he caught 3 balls with the Colts or something to get up. So the same idea, if you look at your career numbers and you're like, not that you're haunted by it, but it was among getting away from me, Chuck, for sure. There is a theme too. People always leaving and I'm the only one left. Gary Pinkel even said the other day, he goes, "Hey, can I ask you something? You've been doing this a long time. But are you about done?" I'm like, "You guys running me off." Jesus.
Oh, come on now. You're the constant there at Fox. And by the way, real quick, just because we did get off track. Not that wasn't great content, but what you said about the Rams is 100% true. And I get this on Twitter all the time because we do like to make fun of the Rams. And all these people are always like, "Oh, get over it. That was 6 years ago." And my response is always, I am over it. I don't lose any sleep over this. Okay. I don't think about it constantly. Am I mad that the Rams left? Do I wish we had an NFL team? Of course. But that doesn't mean when the Rams do something stupid, especially Kroenke, Demoff. And like you said, I watched that interview with Matthew Stafford's wife, and I was laughing. I was laughing at the fact that here's the wife of a player describing and knowing that they have to go into a silent count in their own stadium. And that's hilarious when you're coming off the fact that you left St. Louis, what, market 22 of TV markets, saying that St. Louis couldn't support you when, oh, by the way, it's because your team was freaking terrible. Then you go to the number 2 media market in the country and you have to go into a silent count in your own stadium. So that's hilarious. But again, like, we had the conversation today on the radio. Aaron Donald. How can you not love Aaron Donald? He was here for 2 years. By the way, he's been in the NFL longer than you thought. He's 30 years old. He has almost 100 sacks in his career as an interior lineman. What does he have, like eight or 7 Pro Bowls and All Pros and all these Defensive Player of the Year awards? We kind of got into the conversation that if Aaron Donald plays another, 2, 3, 4 years, don't you think he has to be in the conversation, maybe with a Lawrence Taylor, as potentially the greatest defensive player of all time? I think he's in that echelon, which is pretty crazy.
Right, to be that good, that consistently. No, he's a beast, and when he was here, he was great. And I'm wondering, other than, I think, is Havenstein still on the team? Maybe Johnny Hecker is still there. There's only, that might be it. I'm trying to think, and even they blow out a lot of other people too. You know, that's the other Demoff move, is just fire everybody in the building. Allegedly, reportedly. Sorry, covered legal have to go through this document. But I think Donald.
Was that about you doing the preseason games?
Yes, I'm still that, and I'm so proud of that. I have to tell you, and that's another Martin and Frank radio. It's amazing how Frank dragged me down into all kinds of trouble when we were ripping on Spags and Devaney for firing everybody in the building, and we just kind of worked ourselves up into a lather. I don't know, and we were just like nuking Spag, which is not really Frank's thing either. And I got a text after that show, and it was Demoff. And he said, all of those people were not fired by Spags and Devaney. I'm part of that decision making. I make those decisions. Don't just blame the coach. And he said, next time you want to nuke us, you should include me. And I wrote back, will do. and I went to our boss, Spencer, and I said, because he had a decent relationship with Demoff, I said, you'll be getting a call with Kevin Demoff probably tomorrow, and he will not be happy with me. So the next day, Spencer's like, hey, come by the office. He said, got a call today. He's not happy with you, which who cares? And so I ended up not doing the only regret I have about that. It was fun to do the preseason games. It's not a huge deal. But the next year they brought in Marshall Faulk to do them. And we had done TV shows together and every year. And I loved all of my analysts, but they kept changing them. So I never had anybody for more than a couple of games. That's my only regret. I would like to have done the games with Marshall. But as a related note, like, mocking Jerry Jones is also really easy, isn't it? Because the Cowboys always disappoint. And again, I have nothing against their players. Zeke's one of our guys from here. I wish him success. But because Jerry was so obsessed with Los Angeles, and he's sort of the face of the NFL now, where it used to be like a Pete Rozelle or the Rooney family. Now it's Jerry Jones, which is money, greed, power, which is fine. That's his thing. But then his team never wins. And mocking him, I also think, will never get old, because he was the guy 1 week in 2015 outside a hotel in Chicago. He says, and I told him, I said, we're from St. Louis, would like to know where this is headed. Well, first of all, I love St. Louis and the football Cardinals. I'd come up every Sunday from Arkansas, and boy, I love those teams they had. And Busch Stadium was, this whole spiel. 1 week later, we're in Oxnard, and now it's the LA media, but we're in the scrum, and they're like, Jerry, what are the chances? And he said, well, first of all, keep in mind, now I'm from Los Angeles myself, and I couldn't wait to bring it to him. I'm like, wait, where are you from? And we came back. I remember we played the clips together back to back. And Mandy Murphy is like, we came out, she's like, well, how can you say both those things? I go, that's Jerry. That's how he does it. So mocking the Cowboys, other than liking some of their players, like I like Dak Prescott. I feel bad for him. But that was a horrible move. If you want to talk some NFL, we could break it down, Chuck, like nobody's business, of course.
Well, see, Jerry Jones, it's hard for me to really dislike Jerry Jones. And I say that because I know that he was a big part of the Rams leaving, but also it's more on Kroenke and Roger Goodell in the NFL. I know Jerry Jones is the most powerful owner in the league, but I hate to say it, but I kind of like Jerry Jones because he's always interesting. I remember when you had him on the pregame show once when I first started, either 08 or 09 or whatever. And here he is doing the local pregame show for the Rams for his opponent. It's always interesting It's a soap opera. I mean, this is weird because I grew up watching the Cowboys win their three Super Bowls where they were everything. Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, and also the Cowboys became that team. They were already America's team, but all the bandwagon fans got on. Oh, now I'm a Cowboys fan and all that. They won nonstop, so it was kind of easy to hate the Cowboys. And I don't want to say I ever like really feel sorry for Jerry Jones, but in a weird way, they've lost so much now for about 30 straight years. I weirdly feel bad for Jerry Jones somehow, just because I know
Oh no.
he's trying so hard. Their fans care so much. You see those shots in the stands of the sad fans and they're crying, and these old men that are wearing Cowboys silver and blue. They're like 60 years old and they have these
They got
forlorn.
a holster on and a pistol.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't feel like this Cowboys team, again, Dak seems really likable. We know Zeke from here. Besides Jerry Jones, who I think if the St. Louis thing didn't happen, I wouldn't feel that negatively towards Jerry Jones, because I think he's such an interesting character. I always root for characters, and that means they could also be villains in a way. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that Jerry Jones always keeps things interesting, and from a sports media standpoint, especially, I always appreciate those types.
I'll give you that you don't have to hate him, that maybe you're fascinated by him or entertained by him. You could still be entertained by him. I don't think I can feel sorry for him. I don't think I can go. I'm not there. But how about that play at the end? Like, and I love Nance and Romo's react because they were like fans too. Like, what's he doing? It's not. And then Nance is like, it's not going to work. It's going to run out. Could it be the right call, which is what Mike McCarthy, they all dig in, but poorly executed? There was a certain, but there's not enough time. Like, I don't think you can make that call. You have the window is so tight to get it right. And remember the Spags, were you thinking of this? Remember the game, was it in Jacksonville? And they had like 18 seconds and they were at like the 7-yard line and they trotted out the field goal unit. Everybody's like, why do you take a shot at the end? He's like, not enough time there. If you look at the clock, there's not enough time. And I was like, you could have run like 3 plays. Remember that? And it was like such a bonehead mismanagement of the clock. And then this was the opposite, like going for it when you probably, the margin there was too thin. Like everything had to go perfectly. And obviously it didn't.
Right. I would think that they've practiced that so much that they know that they can probably get that play off most of the time, let's say in 12 seconds, but you're probably, what was it, 14 seconds? You're just probably too close in a playoff game to risk it there. So what I thought was interesting about that play, and people are second guessing, oh, Dak should have, instead of going a certain amount of yards, he should have stopped. He should have handed the ball to the ref, which is probably true. And I'm sure, again, the great teams practice that. They practice the intricacies of, hey, you get down, you immediately find the ref, you toss him the ball, you don't spot it yourself. What I thought was more interesting, and some people jumped on me on Twitter because I wasn't trying to say, hey, that wasn't the Cowboys' fault, that wasn't Dak's fault. It was more so that I had never really thought about the fact that how quickly the referee gets to the ball has an impact. And I wasn't even blaming the ref. But then some folks showed, hey, here's a play where the referee's supposed to be at this yardage, and he was there. But it was more so that we have all this technology these days. And here's the NFL that still uses a chain, which is hilarious, which opens up these memes for like Gene Steratore with the card where he's looking over, which is the famous meme. But also, again, I wasn't passing the buck from, hey, look, Mike McCarthy, by the way, I don't think he's a very good coach. Dak could have done better. But it's more so the fact that you're also basing your strategy on how long it takes a referee to get to the line of scrimmage. And I just think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, and I think the problem is Twitter, there needs to be like a filter that makes it clear this is a sarcastic tweet or this is a joke tweet. And if it's from you or from me, you would think most people get that. Like you're just kind of having fun. It's not a serious take.
But it was.
Well, but they misunderstood. There's so much misunderstanding on Twitter. Like tone is off, or
Yeah.
When John Lester retired, I said this is going to be a close call if he's a Hall of Famer, and I'm not even saying he's a Hall of Famer. I said, is it a Cardinals cap or not? It's going to be close call. I can't tell you how many people said no way. As much as he did for us, there's no way. It's got to be Cubs or Reds. I'm like, oh my god, how could the guy was here for like a week? Of course, it's a fucking joke. Like it's so obvious, is it not? And
Right.
yet all these people, like even still, they're finding this old tweet about it and they're commenting and saying, no, it's a tough call between Cubs and Red Sox. I'm sorry. I hate to say it, I hate to break it to you. I'm like, and maybe it's our fault. If people don't get it, then maybe it wasn't a good joke. I'm just gonna have
Well,
to.
and that's the thing. But I like being sarcastic. I know you do as well. But truthfully, I don't tweet sarcastically as a way to get people. My goal is not to have people pretend it's serious and then I feel like, "Oh, I got you." That's not it. I'm just trying to be funny. But then when I go to my mentions and clearly a lot of people don't get the sarcasm, I almost feel like, is it even worth it? Because I also don't want to look dumb that people actually think that I feel this way when you're
Right.
being sarcastic. So sometimes I'm like, you know what? It's not even worth it.
Buddy, this is good to get back. I feel like we could talk for. I don't see him in the office anymore, so this is our only chance to connect. How about match game? Do you look a little like Matthew Stafford? Do you think?
Ooh, I'll take that. I'll
Even a
take
little
that.
bit? Is that a compliment?
Don't you think it is?
To him or to you?
Well, clearly you didn't mean it as a compliment, but I think Matthew Stafford's a pretty good looking guy.
Okay. Well, then you can take it that way.
I'll think of one for you. Let me think.
Well, with the hat, I'm still incredibly red. And I can't, and my wife made fun of my Zooms where I was looking red. And then she did one and she was red. Something is, I'm going to buy that little light you're talking about because the last time we did this, I said, it looks like I just drank 14 beers. And then our buddy Chris Gardner said, Martin never answered the question. Did he just drink 14 beers? For the record, at this particular moment we're taping, it's 11:10 a.m. I have not had a single beer today.
So mimosas, Irish coffee, probably. But
No alcohol.
so what you said earlier, I think that might have been a little bit of shot at me because towards my end of my tenure at Fox 2, once you do these Zooms and then, okay, there's a high school story, but maybe it's in O'Fallon, Missouri. Maybe it's in O'Fallon, Illinois. Now, back in the day, I would drive my car out there and I'd interview that coach. But then you got Zoom, you got some game video you can use. You throw that coach on a Zoom, all of a sudden you don't have to drive 40 minutes. So I don't know if that was a shot at me. But again, if I ever did that towards the end of my run at Fox 2, it was only due to the safety of COVID, of not wanting to, I wanted to social distance and all that.
No, Chuck's all about efficiency. When we'd be looking for a game to cover on a Tuesday night, he'd say, let me run out and grab a game for you guys. And then he'd say, what about North Glendale? There's a sixth grade game. I'm like, because North Glendale is nearby. How about the Mary Queen of Peace has got a volleyball game? All of a sudden, every Chuck pitch was kind of in a certain radius there.
Well, it's not just a radius. Clearly, Kirkwood and Webster was very close to where I lived. And also, you can work it where what schools are on your way to work. So if you drive up Lindbergh, you're hitting Chaminade, you're hitting the MICDSs and the boroughs of the world. And all you have to do is kind of veer off Lindbergh pretty quickly. And it's a one-stop shot as you're going to work.
So when people would write in, all you guys ever do is cover those private boys' schools. I'm like, nope, not accurate. All we cover is schools that are on Lindbergh on Chuck's drive-in.
That's right. That, by the way, that was not being biased towards public, private. That had nothing to do with anything other than my convenience.
That's what it's all about. Buddy, great to be back. Martin and Marlow, I've lost track. We used to keep track. Are we gonna do this once? Let's just do it once a week with all the topics of the day and a lot of random storytelling.
I love it. And we can do Mondays, but yesterday I had no childcare, so it was just going to be a nightmare to get 30 minutes. So we'll do it once a week on whatever day works. Great stuff.